How are you this morning? Thanks for joining me for another Decorating Discoveries, and thanks for joining me at a little bit later date time this morning. Um, so I hope y'all are doing good. I've missed our Discovery over on Monday. I have really been struggling with allergies. It has just kind of been kicking my tail, and I just felt like kind of like a zombie. Which I've done some videos where I've been medicated, and I just felt like I look like this. So I just was not feeling myself. So I apologize for not having one, but really you didn't want to see it. So thank y'all for joining me for another Decorating Discoveries. And what this series is about is questions you've asked me. So you ask the questions, I answer them, and I get the same questions over and over again from clients. So I just thought you could all benefit from these questions because you might have it too, and maybe you've not asked. So if you're joining and you're popping on, if you'll say hi, I'd appreciate it. So I don't feel like I'm just talking to myself, which that's okay too. So I hope you'll say hi, and maybe share this on your wall if you think someone else would like to join in. I would really appreciate that. That helps me reach more people. So share it, like it, comment, let me know what you think. Okay, so today we're going to talk about drapery. So what do I mean drapery? Window treatments, curtains, blinds, shutters, panels, toppers, all those things are considered drapery and window treatments. So the question that I was asked, and I've gotten lots of questions, and I'll hit a few of those today and share some tips with you when you're selecting yours. So here's the question: does every window need a window treatment? And that's a great question. That's a great question. So, we talked before about layers. And so drapery is another layer to add to the space. So if you're not a layers kind of person, then maybe it's not a good option for you. But I'm a layers kind of person. I love fabrics. I think it really softens up a room. I mean, window treatment solves so many problems. So, um, that's definitely something to consider and know about yourself if you're a layer kind of person. So, but here's some other things to consider that we haven't talked about. What about privacy and sunlight, heat, how the space is used, um, the view provided by the window, or symmetry? There's a client that we're waiting to install her draperies because things are kind of just now getting going again, so we might be doing that pretty soon. But remember how we talked about shutters? And they can often solve the problem if a home maybe wasn't built with symmetry in mind, and so it can be a little awkward. Well, when there's sometimes there's not symmetry outside, but sometimes there's not symmetry inside with windows, and so they might not be centered on a wall, or they might not frame the wall. It might just be randomly placed on the wall that looks good outside, but it doesn't really look the best inside. Do y'all have any windows like that? Well, that's this particular client's case, and so we can use drapery to make the window appear centered, to provide some visual balance, or some balance visually, to make it. It's a little trick. We didn't move the window, but it just makes it appear like it's symmetrical, and it just feels more balanced. It feels better in the space. So it just depends on what problem you're trying to solve. So that's something to consider. So if privacy is your concern, let's say it's a bedroom where typically that's where we want a little bit more privacy. You can consider layering your window treatments or your draperies. So what I'm talking about there is if you have shades or shutters or blinds, you can, in addition to those, add a window treatment panel. So then you have some overlap. So sometimes with blinds, even when they're closed, you have some gaps between each of the slats, or maybe you'll have a gap over on the side. So it might feel better to you to have just an extra layer of privacy and add that panel on top, the panels on top that are functional, meaning they can open and close, like we talked about with shutters for the exterior. So, excuse me, for the interior, you can have stationary and functional draperies as well. So when they're functional, they're not only pretty, but they can also provide privacy. Y'all like how I coordinated my straw to my shirt? Okay, side note. I spend a lot of time picking the perfect straw to the cup because I have to like the straw with the cup. And I just thought the purple looks really cute with the green. It brings me joy. That's all that matters. Okay, so does that make sense as far as the privacy goes, that you can layer up your window treatments to add layers of privacy? So something else that you can consider when you're looking at privacy are blackout draperies. So what blackout draperies do is, you know, if you have some draperies closed and you don't, let's say you don't have blinds or shutters, you just have panels, you just have drapery panels, that there can be shadows that you can see based on where the lighting is. If it's dark outside and lights are on the inside, you can see shadows moving inside. So a way to eliminate that is to use a blackout drapery. So you can't see from the outside, there's no shadows you can see inside when the lights are on. So they can provide additional privacy too. So that's a good option. So if sunlight is your issue and you're looking to maybe address, you've got a window where there's a lot of maybe sun, the window faces the west and there's a lot of afternoon sun and heat coming in. So you want some drapery to block that and help with that. So draperies can help in that situation. And or if you work nights and you need to sleep during the day, blackout draperies are a good solution for that too. So in addition to providing privacy and blocking sunlight, they can also help with your utility bills because they provide just another layer of insulation and protection if you have drafty windows or heat coming in, and it can block that. So it's really, blackout draperies are really a good option. The other thing with blackout draperies is they're really my go-to when we're doing custom draperies because of all the things that I've mentioned, but additionally that when you have sunlight shining through your fabric that's not lined or doesn't have a blackout drapery, even with lining this can happen. The sunlight is a color, right? It's yellow. So when it shines through your fabric, have you ever noticed how the fabric changes color? Well, you might have guessed I kind of don't like that. For me personally, that bothers me. So if you use a blackout lining, it keeps the color in the fabric truer, so it reads better during all times of the day. So if that is a concern for you, then that's another great solution, another great reason to choose blackout. There's all kinds of reasons. I'll stop with blackout. If you want more information on blackout and all the wonderful things about blackout, I can keep talking about blackout all day, air day. Okay, I'll stop though. So if you're considering the view of the window, do you want to block the view? Do you want to enhance the view? Oftentimes clients feel that if they have a pretty view, okay, I'm not going to use any drapery because it'll take away from the view. When in reality, what drapery does for a pretty view, if it's installed and chosen correctly, I'm not just talking about slapping anything up there, but if it's chosen correctly and installed correctly, that it can actually enhance the view. It can frame your view. So you don't want to ever cover up a window typically ever, unless you're trying to block, like I mentioned, unless you're trying to block a view. But framing the window actually visually, it expands the view, because you know how we've talked about before that color and contrast draw the eye to the space. And I don't know if y'all saw my post about lamps, and that a solid, or rather a lamp that matches the wall color, while it's not a pop of color of a contrast, it provides interest because it's another layer, it's a different texture. You can draw attention to a space without doing a pop of color. You can draw attention to it by adding a layer. And the same thing applies with draperies and window treatments. So if you want to draw attention to a view, consider framing that window with drapery. It's like parentheses, and it draws you into that area. So you don't want to cover up the windows, you want to enhance them. So keep that in mind when you're installing. A common mistake I see with draperies is that clients will and followers will install their drapery on the window, like directly on the window, right above the window and on the sides of the window. So what you'll want to do is you want to avoid that, because that it actually visually lowers and tightens the room. It doesn't open it up as much as if you really just draw attention to the window and address the window and frame the window, not cover it up. You want to frame it and not cover it up. Okay, so here's some general, along those lines, here's some general guidelines when you're choosing and installing your draperies. And if you feel that, okay, I see the value in maybe a custom drapery, I see the value in some nicer draperies, but is it really necessary to have them professionally installed? Yes, there is value to a professional installation, because they can make those adjustments, because guess what? Sometimes our windows are not plumb. Yep, sometimes that is the truth. So they can make those adjustments and do and those little visual things, those little tricks that we can do to make it appear as though it's plumb and everything's nice and level, and they're exactly the same distance all the way across the bottom. You don't have some touching the floor and then this much space above the floor. They can level all those things out. That's just one of the many things that a professional installer can do. And they can dress the window so they can adjust it and make sure that it is positioned in the correct spot. So it's not spread out too far, it's not scrunched up too much, it's just perfectly displayed. So it is worth, professional installations are worth it. So, and you don't have to have a custom drapery to have a professional installation. So if you need help with that, let me know. Okay, so here's some general guidelines when you're choosing and installing your draperies. So like I mentioned, I love me some blackout. So consider blackout for more than privacy. Aesthetically, they are more appealing because they eliminate shadowing. So I mentioned that already with the with your fabric, that it can, when the sun shines in, that it changes the color of the fabric. But what I'm talking about here, the other thing that they do is that if your draperies are not black outlined, that when you hang them, when you frame the window and you're not covering up the window, what happens is when that sun shines in, you see an outline of your window. Do you know what I'm talking about? So if you use black outlining, you eliminate that. So if you're trying to frame the window and visually raise the height of the ceiling and open up the space, but then when the sun shines in, you see the outlining of the window, you're kind of defeating the purpose of that. So, and you don't have to do custom draperies to get a blackout lining. So if you need help sourcing blackout draperies, hit me up. I can help you out. Okay, so blackout draperies, don't rule them out. Don't rule them out. Okay, so the other thing to keep in mind is you want to hang them higher than the window, because this visually expands the window and the ceiling. So when you want to err on the side of hanging them higher than you think that you should, then just right above the window frame. Okay? If you hear only one thing, that might be the most important tip, is hang your drapery higher and wider than the window. So it overlaps the edge of the window. You know, when we talked about connecting the dots, like with your rugs and your artwork, you don't want them hanging out there by themselves. Well, it's a similar concept with drapery, is that you just want to overlap your window, not cover it up. So you want to cover up the edge on the sides, but you can have space above the window that's not covered by the drapery. Let's say you just have panels. Okay, so there's space above the window that's not covered because the panels just cover the sides. So that's okay. Okay, so another thing, or guideline to think about when you're choosing draperies, is to use rings as opposed to a rod pocket. And here's why: is that if you're using a rod pocket and it's a functioning treatment and you're having to slide it back and forth, you're just like yanking on it and it never looks consistent and neat and dressed and sharp. It might feel a little sloppy. Well, if you put that same drapery on some rings, then it slides much easier and you can adjust it better and keep it looking nicer and neater when it's opened and when it's closed. So that's what I love rings. Even, you know, obviously with a custom drapery, we're going to put it on a ring, but even if you do a ready-made and it's a rod pocket or something like that, rings are really a better option to keep things looking neat and tidy and just nice. Also, something to consider is that you can purchase gathering tape, so you can put that on the top of your tab top to convert it to where you can use rings or a rod pocket. So you can gather it and pleat it and use your rings. And the great thing about that, with the rings, it keeps it looking nice and neat. The other thing that keeps it looking nice and neat are those pleats, because it's always evenly spaced when it's opened or closed. So just so you know, the expense with your draperies and so forth, you want them to look nice open and closed. So rings and pleats help with that, if that's a problem for you. Now if they're stationary, you can dress them and then they stay, so you don't have that issue with them being bunched up or too open or that type of thing. So I hope you found this helpful. Was this helpful? Is anyone else wondering about draperies? Do you have any other drapery or window treatment questions for me? So comment and let me know if you do, and I'm more than happy to answer. If something didn't make sense, if you're like, what are you talking about shadowing? What are you talking about on those things? If I did not explain that well, or you have a few more clarifying questions about that, let me know. I'm more than happy to answer.